Okay, so theme for today is about quantitative versus qualitative research. So basically at the end of today, you should be able to design a research study and select a qualitative or a quantitative approach. And basically, where's my pointer? Basically, what it's about is that qualitative research looks at why, answers exploratory why questions, and it enables flexible discourse. So it's about asking questions and getting depth of response. So it's saying to Mbali, or rather, if I asked Mbali a quantitative question, I would say to her, Mbali, are you wearing black today because it's Black Friday? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. All right. But so do you see? That's a quantitative question because there's only one answer to it. Whereas if I said to, is it Zanele? Lavina, sorry. If I said to Lavina, Davina, sorry. Why are you wearing black today?
Yeah, for the rain thing.
Okay, so do you see? But all right, and now I can start. Now I can start a discourse with Davina, and I can say to her, why do you feel strongly about it? Have you been affected by it? Do you understand what I'm saying? So that's a qualitative question because it opens us up to more depth. Whereas if I asked the quantitative question and I said to everybody who's wearing black in class today, are you doing it for the for Black Friday, and say there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us in black. So say you say no, you didn't know about it, you just happened to like black this morning, and 4 of us say yes. So it's a type of answer, but it's quantitative, all right, and there's no depth to it. Does everybody understand the concept that I'm trying to explain? Okay. All right, and then also with qualitative research, one of the things that you can also do is interviews, and so that provides face-to-face and non-verbal indicators. Because when you start the conversation, you can see from the person's body language whether you should continue in a certain line of inquiry or whether you should, just stop there because it might be too painful, or the person as body language is saying to you, I'm not interested in this. Okay, so the disadvantages of qualitative research is that you have small numbers. And the problem then with the small numbers is that if one doesn't follow a proper and very rigorous approach and get enough qualitative data, people will say, well, there were 5 people that you asked about Black Friday. So, what is the statistical significance of that? All right. And so that's why qualitative research is normally used when we are exploring the thing initially, so that it gives us answers that we can use later on when we go into a more quantitative approach. All right. So I could have an interview with everybody here who is in black, and we could talk about why are we supporting it, what is so bad about it, how have we been affected by it, and I can get sentences and I can get words from you, and then we could analyze that data and we could set up a questionnaire where we could then ask the whole class, if I had known about Black Friday, I would have supported it because I think it is wrong that women are raped every day. And then you have a Likert scale of strongly disagree to strongly agree. Do you understand? But then we have a bigger sample size, so then it becomes quantitative. Okay. So with quantitative research, the answers are how much or how many. It provides more decision-making substance or confirmation. Because if we can say out of 48 million people in South Africa, 40 million people support the idea that women shouldn't be raped, then we have a strong support base behind us. And it is more statistically robust. The problem with it is that it's generally more expensive and time consuming. Because you can think that if we now want to ask for all 48,000 people in South Africa, or let's say we take a 10% sample, that's still 4,000 people. You can see that it would take quite a lot of time and effort to get the questionnaires out to everybody and to get everybody to fill in the questionnaires. And with quantitative research, you have a fixed questionnaire structure, and they normally, well, there is in quantitative research, you don't ask questions of substantiate your answer, or why do you think so, or do you think that we've missed something? Do you understand what I'm saying? So it's straight Likert scale or yes no type of questions. And so if there is something missing from the questionnaire, you're not going to know that, because the respondent is only responding to the questions that you are asking them. Whereas with qualitative, you ask more open-ended questions, so the respondent can tell you more detail of what they think and what they perceive. Okay, so this I've basically discussed. Words, sentences, narratives, what the meaning, definition, or analogy, or model, or metaphor characterizing something. Whereas here we have numbers and figures. How much? So how much do you agree with this statement? Quantitative assumes the meaning and refers to a measure of it. Okay, so we assume that we all have the same understanding of the meaning of, say, for example, the success of a community service project. And so we assume when we set up a quantitative questionnaire that if I read the question and Pumzile reads the question, we are going to have the same understanding. All right. Whereas qualitative is open to interpretation, and the person can tell you what their interpretation is. Does that make sense? Okay, so this is just to show you that research is ongoing. So we start and we explore, and we use qualitative research where we do in-depth interviews and ethnographic observation. So in other words, we can go into the community and we can observe how we are learning or how the people are living. So for example, in our Kliptown project, we could go and observe how the children are being tutored and how they respond to the tutoring. Okay, that would be a qualitative study. Or we could go and interview the children and we could ask them, you know, how do you feel about the tutoring? Is it helping you with your work at school? Are you coping better with your work at school now that you're part of the Kliptown program? Do you understand? So that's the start. So this is in-depth interviews. Then we go to the theorizing phase where we start doing concept testing or prototype testing. So now the children have told us that they like the tutors that make them laugh. So now we go to the tutors and we say to them, do you try to make the children laugh? Do you try and make it fun for the children? And then some of them say yes and some of them say no. And then we ask or we look at the results of the children, and we see that those where the tutors say that they make the children laugh, the children do better. Do you understand? So you're starting to theorize, and you're starting to test hypothesis, but this would be more on a case study basis. So you wouldn't have a huge statistical sample. You wouldn't have all the schools in Soweto. You would only be talking to the tutors in Kliptown. So it's qualitative because your sample size is small. Then with the next step is then validation. So you then start testing the usability of the questions that you have set up. And there you could typically use a Delphi study where you ask experts to help you come up with the questions that you should be asking. All right. And then at the end of the day, you then get to the quantitative research. And here they talk about customer surveys. But if you think about our community service project, we could, in the quantitative research part, survey the whole community that live in Kliptown, and we could ask them what has the impact of the project been. Okay, but we've now understood the project through all the qualitative research and the exploratory research that we've done first. Okay, does that make sense? Have you all died and switched off your brains and Okay, so now I would like you to do question 1 of the class assignment in your groups. 1, 2, 3, 4 here. 1, 2, 5. You 5, hey. Are you guys 4? No, I've given you 5. I'm sorry, let me just quickly switch off the... Okay, so let me just start here. Well, here again then. So you need a plan which is related to your research question, and which will then tell you what sources and types of information are we going to look at. So in Sebastian's example of the perception of services of Telkom customers, he might decide, okay, let's first only look at literature in the telecommunications industry. But he might then find that in the literature in the telecommunications industry, there is nothing that's written about how do you measure the perception of customers regarding service. All right. So then he will broaden his search, and he will say, okay, let's look at service in general. And he might find that McDonald's does a survey to look at service, and Eskom does a survey to look at service, and I don't know what other services are there. Maybe hotels do questionnaires to find out what perception of service is. All right, and so the activity, because of the fact that the sources are not specific enough, part of his activity will then be to take those sources and make them relevant to the industry that he is working in. All right, and as I said, it might be that he even finds a standardized questionnaire that is already used, so he can then use that as is. And then you need a framework for specifying the relationship amongst the study's variables. So in terms of the service, what is it that we want to know? What are the various ways in which we think that we are serving the customers, and what is their perception in terms of those different ways in which we serve them? Okay, and then it outlines the procedure for every research activity. So this is what comes in your proposal. In the last part of the proposal where you talk about your research design, you basically have to say exactly what are you going to do. So Sebastian would say, okay, I am going to first determine what my questionnaire is going to look like by looking at the literature. My initial search of the literature says that there isn't a standardized questionnaire that I have to use, so I will have to develop that questionnaire. So the first part of my study will be qualitative, where I will use maybe a focus group of experts from Telkom, where I will ask them the question, what are the different elements of service that we should ask perception of our clients of? Does that make sense, Sebastian? Then the next step would be, okay, here is now the questions that we need to ask. We now have to pilot the questionnaire because we in Telkom speak a certain language and we have certain jargon that we use, but Mbali that doesn't work for Telkom maybe doesn't understand that type of jargon. So I have to ask somebody like Mbali, who's a user of Telkom services, to look at the questionnaire and comment on it and tell me whether it's clear. So you would then, as part of your procedure, you would outline that there would be a research activity where you would pilot the questionnaire. Right, and then the next activity would then obviously be to send out the questionnaire to customers of Telkom and to then analyze the data and then to come to some other conclusion that says on the whole people are unhappy with Telkom, or on the whole people are happy with Telkom, or on the whole they're happy, but there is this specific area where we need to improve our service. Okay, and so that's the answer for Telkom, but part of the work that he has done as well is to set up a questionnaire that can be used in the telecommunications industry to measure service. All right, so if he then puts that in the academic domain, the next time somebody wants to measure service in the telecommunications industry, they can then use that questionnaire. Do you understand? So you solve the business problem, but you also add to the academic literature. All right. And so when you are busy with academic research, which is what we are trying to train you to do here, you must always look at what is the academic contribution that my study will make as well. All right. So what kind of answers is the study looking for? Which methods will be applied to find the answers? Okay, and we haven't talked about all the methods yet, so just be aware that there are different methods, and that I think that because as adults where we are at the moment in our lives, most of us have taken part in a survey. Right, so we're comfortable with a survey because we've done that before. So the first thing that we think is, okay, we should use a survey. But you must be aware that there are various methods, and you must pick the method that will give you the best answer for the question that you have. What techniques will be used to gather the data? So we've picked a method. So say we've picked a focus group. There are still various techniques that you can use within the focus group. You can use a nominal group technique. You can use brainstorming. So you have to be specific as to how are you going to apply that specific method. Even in terms of a survey, is it going to be a self-administered survey? So in other words, I give you the surveys and you fill them in. Or is it going to be an electronic self-administered survey? So I send you an email and you fill it in. or is it going to be a assisted survey? So I give you the survey and you can read the questions, but I'm standing here, so if you have any questions, you can ask me. Or is it going to be a survey with interview? So I read the question and I ask you what is your answer, and I tick your answer. So do you see that there are various techniques, and the techniques are applicable to most of the methods. All right, and one must always have clearly in your mind that there's a difference between methods and techniques, because most methods use questionnaires, but it's the content of the questionnaire and the way that the questionnaire is asked that's different. Right, then what kind of sampling will be used? And we're talking about sampling next in detail. And how will time and cost constraints be dealt with? Right, so when people start a master's, they normally want to save the world. And it's even worse when people do a PhD. So one has to, at a point, cut it off and say, okay, I've answered. Well, firstly, you have to make sure that the number of research questions you have are realistic. So say Sebastian is doing his master's now in measuring the perceptions of telecom clients, and he finds that there is very little in the literature on how do you actually measure service. Okay? So then he might decide, okay, for the purposes of the master's, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just develop a framework of how do you measure service. And that's, once I've done that, my master's is finished. Okay, so research never stops, because he can then decide, all right, in my work environment, I would then like to apply that questionnaire and get actual data that will answer a question in the business environment. Or he might decide, and then I want to take this further in a PhD, where I want to test it on telecom customers and I want to test it on MTN customers. Do you understand what I'm saying? So research is never finished. There's always the next question. All right. Because otherwise we would be living in a perfect world. We would know all the answers. You know, there was a guy in the head of the US Patent Office in 1900 said that everything that has been that will be discovered, or that can possibly be discovered, has been discovered. And how wrong was he? If you think from 1900 to now, what advances we have made. Okay, so research is never the last. Your PhD or my PhD that's lying there on the shelf is never the final answer, because there's always going to be somebody that's going to take that as an input and they're going to take it further. All right. And so you must be aware that there are time and cost constraints, and you can't just go on forever. Okay, so now you can do question 2 of the group assignments. Let's go on. No. Okay, so now we get to exploratory, descriptive, and causal study. So exploratory studies is where there is a lack of a clear idea of the problem that will be discovered in the study. So remember with the telecom example, we're not clear on how to measure service. All right, so we would then have to do an exploratory study. Of course, the study that we are doing for our Kliptown youth project to find out how do you measure success of community service projects is very exploratory in nature. Okay, we haven't looked at the literature, but I do not think that we are going to find a standardized questionnaire that will answer the question for us. Right, so that means that we are going to have to explore the problem, and we will have to develop the concepts more clearly. So we're going to have to say, all right, do we measure it in terms of financial sustainability? Do we measure it in terms of impact on the community? So there will probably be a whole basket of factors. But we will have to develop those concepts, and we will have to try and understand better what the concepts are. It also establishes priorities. So which one is the most important to understand better first? Right? Develops operational definitions, because when we're talking about an organization, we understand what we mean by financial sustainability. Okay, because there's a lot of studies done by that, and it means that you make a profit in the long term. And if it's JSE listed or it's a listed company, there are already measures in place that say, is this company financially sustainable or not? Okay, whereas when we talk about financial sustainability in community service projects, what do we mean by that? Okay, and we are going to have to wrestle with that and develop an operational definition. And an operational definition is basically a definition that we use in the study, which we then at the end of the study will update and change and modify according to the findings of the study. Right, and then exploratory studies save time and money, because it helps us to make sure that we are asking the correct questions. Because we could just jump in and where angels fear to tread, and decide to do this survey of 4 million people in South Africa, where we ask them questions around why would you support a community service project, how do you think the impact of a community, or what do you think, which of the following are the most important impacts of a community service project? And then we can think of things like financial sustainability, it empowers the people, it creates jobs. Do you understand? But we now basically thumb-sucking things, and we're not sure whether those are the right things and the right measures. And that's why we do the exploratory study, because it saves us time and money down the line. And the same thing with Sebastian's study with Telkom. By taking the literature on service and using that together with expertise of people inside of Telkom to explore what the questionnaire should look like, he's going to save time and money at the end of the day, because he's then going to be sure that he's asking the right questions. Does that make sense? Right, so descriptive studies. So here are where we start asking the what, why, when, how, where, and who types of questions. And here we have clearly stated hypotheses. So with an exploratory study, there are no hypotheses, because we don't know yet what the hypotheses should be. And that's why we need to do the exploratory study, so that we can get to hypotheses. So it's structured with clearly stated hypotheses or questions, and it describes phenomena or characteristics associated with the subject's population. It estimates the proportion of population with these characteristics, and it discovers association among variables. So if we take Sebastian's example of the Telkom study, we might discover that if we look at the characteristics associated with the subject's population, we might find that people who live in townships are happy with the landline service, whereas people that live in Sandton are unhappy with the landline service. Do you see? So we are starting to describe the characteristics associated with the subject's population. Whereas in the exploratory study, where we just wanted to know what are the questions we should ask, there was nothing associated to the population yet. And then we can start estimating proportions of the population with these characteristics. So if we ask 1,000 people in Soweto and 1,000 people in Sandton, we can start saying 50%, or no, let's say 75% of the respondents in Soweto were happy with the service. So from that, we can now say that 75% of people in Soweto are happy with the service. Right. But of course, we can only do that if we can prove it statistically. Right. And we're not going to go into that proof of the statistics in this course, but just be aware that you need to be able to prove that statistically. All right. And then it also discovers associations among variables. So there might be a question around response time of technicians for maintenance, and then a general question around general satisfaction of maintenance. And there might be a correlation that those who perceive the response time to be fast are more satisfied than those that perceive the response time not to be fast. Okay, does it make any sense what I'm saying? Because you're all looking at me with these dull, I've just written a test eyes. Okay. Okay, but that's why I'm also recording it so you can go back. All right, so then the last type of study is a causal study. So the ideal standard of causation is one variable always causes another and no other variable has the same causal effects. Okay, so if the response time of telecom technicians is high, people are always satisfied with a landline service. And there is nothing else that makes them happy. Okay. Yes. So there isn't any other variable that makes them happy. That's ideal causation. But unfortunately, we don't live in an ideal world, and there are always multiple factors. Okay, so if we take the example that I've used before of why don't people come to class, there will always be various factors. Some people might not like me or my lecturing style. Some people might have work commitments. Some people might not like attending class. Some people might be ill. Do you understand what I'm saying? So there isn't an ideal standard of causation. And the problem with studies where an ideal cause of a standard of causation is inferred is that you then question it, because then you say, but is that really the only reason? Okay, so normally we have a more refined cause and effect module. So individual variables are not the cause of the specific effects, but that processes are the cause of processes. So certain things happen, and because of that, there is a certain outcome. All right. So in the ideal world, we would like to say that if we send all project managers to do the BTEC in project management, we will get 100% success in projects. That would be ideal causation. But we all know that it doesn't work like that. Okay.
So ideal causation would be like a one-to-one relationship.
Yes, a one-to-one relationship. Yes. And especially, I mean, when we are talking in, I've been having to explain grade 10 science to my son this week, and so when you're talking science and you talk about the potential energy of a body, there is ideal causation, but if you are in a vacuum, do you understand? Because the kinetic energy of the body is affected by friction and by air. What do you call it? Yeah, no, but the formula says kinetic energy is half the mass times the velocity squared of the body. All right, but that's not quite true, because the velocity is affected by the environment. So that's true in a vacuum. All right. So if in science, which is supposed to be more pure and easier to understand and easier to explain causations, we already have to say but and if and it depends. How much more in business research? How much more complex does the problem become? Because we're dealing with people. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so now you can do the last